Thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday to be here with all of us this morning for the Clean Air Advocacy training. So my name is Deja Williams, and I am the Environmental Justice Manager for Clean Air NC. And today will be the first of two sessions in the Clean Air Advocacy training series aimed at increasing our understanding of air pollution in our communities, connecting residents with local resources and professionals, and encouraging solutions to advocate for cleaner air. So today's session, we're going to cover air quality monitoring efforts, both locally at the community level and at the countywide regulatory level within the Charlotte region. And participants will also learn how to find and understand air pollution data on exposure, as well as how to get involved in community air monitoring efforts around your homes. So I just wanted to quickly introduce our partners for this event, and then we can get started. So I'm with Clean Air, as I said, and our work centers around solutions that address three powerful determinants of health, which we'll learn a little bit more about today. And those are climate change, air pollution, and environmental justice. So through education, air monitoring, research, and community resiliency building, we work to ensure our communities have access to clean air and a livable environment. And then, of course, we have the historic West End Green District, who is also hosting this event. And that initiative is between residents in the historic West End who have been collaborating with Clean Air NC since 2017. Originally to monitor levels of air pollution, but now 5 years later, the initiative has grown into something much bigger with projects aimed at implementing green infrastructure, strategic tree planting. We're working on installing EV charging stations and community clean awareness programs like today's session. And you'll learn a lot more about how to get involved in this initiative today. And then finally, we have Mecklenburg County Air Quality, who administers state and federal regulatory programs to limit and minimize criteria air pollutants from industrial sources. The department also works hard to continue the long trend of air quality improvements in Mecklenburg County through programs like the grants to replace aging diesel engines and breathing room, as well as through their monitoring efforts through the 5 federal air monitors that are located in the county, which Megan will touch upon today. So before starting presentations, I just wanted to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So for starters, this training is being recorded and it will be available and sent via email along with the presentations that will be presented and the relevant resources of those presentations. So I really encourage you to share the recording with your neighbors. So participants in this training, it's been mentioned to some residents, but participants in this training, if you're not aware, that are a part of the historic West End, the Merrickmore community, and other impacted communities will receive a stipend for completing both sessions in the training series. So if you have a neighbor that wants to join in the second session, they couldn't make it to this session, please feel free to share the recording with them so they're up to speed and able to participate in the second session, which will be Monday, July 25th from 6 to 7:30. Thirdly, before the session, you should have received an email with a survey link about what advocacy means to you. We will be sending out another survey after the session to follow up about what you found valuable in the information presented today, so just be on the lookout for that. And then lastly, we have 3 presentations today. Each will run for about in between 15 to 25 minutes, and then we'll take a break between each presenter to allow for questions. But if you have any questions that pop up during the presentation, just feel free to type them in the chat, and our team, we have Kelly and Andrew here, they're going to queue your questions and make sure that we address all of them. If you're calling in, I don't know if anyone's calling in, but if you are, you can press *6 to mute and unmute yourself, and then you can also press *9 to raise and lower your hand. So, without further ado, I wanted to introduce our agenda for today and, of course, welcome all of our speakers. So our first presentation will be focused on advocacy efforts within the historic West End Green District, how the community has been monitoring levels of air quality and some of the advocacy efforts that have come out of that. And then myself and Miriam Magoob, who is also with Clean Air, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that monitoring effort and some of the data that has come out of monitoring in the community over the past 4 years, as well as how communities can be just a little bit more aware of how to locate some of the sources of pollution in their communities. And then finally, Megan Green with Mecklenburg County Air Quality is going to go a little bit more into monitoring, but at the regulatory level, as well as how you can get involved within those efforts and connect you with the county. So we will start with our first presentation. Ron and Maddie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I am Maddie Marshall, president of Historic Washington Heights, also one of the citizen scientists / air keepers in the historic West End Green District.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ron Ross. I'm neighborhood president of Northwood Estates. Also Clean Air NC air keeper, and also part of the historic West End Green District.
All right. So before we get into air quality monitoring and all of the things that encompass that, I wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of what air pollution actually is. So it's created when harmful substances in the form of gas, liquids, or solids enter our air in a way that's detrimental to human health and the quality of our environment. So most air pollution is invisible, but when pollution levels do get high enough and concentrated together, it can appear as haze, smog, smoke, or dust. And the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, sets standards for 6 criteria pollutants. They're listed here on this slide. However, 2 main pollutants of concern in North Carolina are ground level ozone and particulate matter because of their impacts on our health. And we'll get in a little bit more into that later. So they're natural processes that create air pollution, but most pollution enters our atmosphere from human-made sources. And Ron is going to get into a little bit more of specific examples of air pollution sources in the historic West End, but most human-made air pollution comes from things such as burning fossil fuels, industrial and commercial manufacturing, power plants, refineries, and of course, vehicles, among many other sources. And unfortunately, air pollution, it both persists in the atmosphere, and it can also be carried long distances by winds, crossing local and regional and even continental boundaries. And because, of course, we need air to live and we're breathing it in constantly, we cannot easily avoid being exposed to it. And this exposure can have serious health harms at all stages of life. Short-term exposure can cause irritation to eyes, nose, and throat, as well as potential headaches. But long-term exposure to air pollution can lead to a wide range of diseases and health harms. Just as an example, for the average adult, it can lead to heart disease, stroke, and even diabetes. For elderly populations, long-term exposure has been linked to dementia and heart failure. For pregnant women, unfortunately, it can cause low birth rate and miscarriages. And then for children who are especially vulnerable to the effects of air pollution, it can cause slower development of their lungs and, of course, asthma. And just to put in perspective how impactful air pollution can be in the context of children, in North Carolina, for example, asthma is the primary reason that our students miss school across the state. So the impacts of air pollution really can create a trickle-down effect and impact our quality of life as a whole. So just to further illustrate this a little bit, as you can see here on this graph, it contains the 5 leading causes of death in North Carolina for 2020. And 4 out of 5 of those causes have the potential to be exacerbated by air pollution due to toxic exposure and respiratory stress or cause these issues. So not only that, but excluding accidents on this list, Black and Brown individuals are also more likely to either suffer or die from these causes of death nationally. The most recent example of this, of course, is COVID-19. If we've been following the news, we know that Black and Brown communities have died at a very disproportionate rate from COVID. And studies have found that those that are exposed to air pollution over the long term are 8 to 9% more likely to die from COVID-19. So when we factor all of this in, the connection between air pollution, systemic inequality, and where we live just becomes really clear. And that's why air pollution is an environmental justice issue.
Okay. Environmental justice is an air pollution is an environmental justice issue. Environmental justice means that no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of negative environmental effects that result from operations or policies pursued by commerce, industry, or government. If you take a look at the map, it shows the interstates and roadways that are cutting through the historic West End. The red and yellow shading represents areas of the city where redlining was done, limiting public and private investment, which affected property and land values. And the area in green is south of Charlotte, which is a more affluent, wealthier area, part of the city of Charlotte. And if you are able to see, there's two orange squares that represent EPA monitors in the city that are monitoring the fine particle pollution. And the circles that you see are representing facilities that pollute the air, could even come from gas stations, which emit volatile organic compounds, could come from, even someone that's putting gasoline in their car, or it could be from industrial sources of pollution. So the issue of environmental justice arises when certain communities, through no fault of their own, more impacted than others by the source of pollution located near where they live, work, and play. And according to the American Lung Association, the Black and Indigenous and other communities of color are 61% more likely to live in these areas that reflect or are indicative of unhealthy air compared to whites. And if you take a look at, this is Charlotte's 1935 redlining disinvestment map. It shows areas in red and yellow where financial institutions did not make home loans or other kinds of community investments. Again, this was in predominantly Black communities. If you take a look at the middle map, it's a residential security map from 1937. It was created by the Federal Home Owners Loan Corporation. And this dictated who and where loans would be granted by financial institutions. So for decades, homeowners and investors in these areas or neighborhoods would find it almost impossible to get back of any kind. Again, this has affected the residents' ability to purchase and properly maintain inequality housing. And if you look in the map, you'll see, again, this is back from 1937. You'll see some of the neighborhoods that some of us on this call are familiar with that existed. These are Black neighborhoods, and they're in the Black text: Greenville, Biddleville, Brooklyn, and just to name a few of them. And so if you go over to the map on the far right side, there's segregation by poverty. See that what had become Charlotte's poverty crescent. And it was created in major part by the redlining of the 30s and 40s. These inequities and lack of resources make residents more vulnerable to the impacts of extreme heat and weather conditions.
Maddie Marsha, I want to talk a little bit about the social determinants of health. At every stage of life, Health is determined by complex interaction between social and economic factors, the physical environment, and individual behavior influenced by the distribution of power, wealth, and other resources across society. The social conditions we face every day, where we live, work, and play, have a greater impact on our health and life expectancy than the health care that we receive. People can be at greater risk to air pollution despite experiencing the same exposures.
So, Maddie, as Ron pointed out in this graph here, the segregation by poverty in part influenced by redlining, you can see the same pattern in terms of formerly redlined communities are also the same communities that have less than high school graduate population below poverty, have less access to healthy and fresh food. And that also has influenced the pattern of, as you can see, where industries are located. So this is a map that's pulled from the Environmental Protection Agency's Environmental Justice Screening and Mapping tool. And so where you see the shades of red and orange, that's going to indicate where Black and Brown communities are located in Mecklenburg County, which, as you can see, again, is primarily made up of the Crescent and formerly redlined neighborhoods. And then the blue dots, according to the EPA, shows facilities which emit air pollution and toxic releases. So as you can see, tools like the EPA EJ screen, and I've created a link here just in case you want to explore this after the presentation and find some more trends. But it provides evidence to exactly what Maddie and Ron are talking about and what many environmental justice communities have been advocating for decades, and explaining in that there's a connection between race and how we experience pollution, and that we need to ensure that vulnerable areas are not continually overburdened. So again, these are just sources of toxic air pollution, but there's other sources within the community as well.
And just to kind of bring things a little forward, the 1960s urban, which I call the Negro renewal, brought about a new freeway system, which included I-77, Brookshire Freeway, which is the NC 16 freeway, that went through Black communities. With the intentionality of these historical racist practices, this resulted in a high concentration of industrial facilities, truck and vehicular traffic, trains, and other industrial types of facilities that emit pollution, were giving rise to residents' increased exposure to air pollution and related health issues that are just far too common in our community. So if you take a look at the depiction here, the top picture is a photograph of Martin Marietta Rock Quarry, which is located off of Beatty's Ford Road, and there's a map depicting that. You can kind of see an indentation of the rock quarry and the size of it. Again, this is a facility that basically mines the rock that's used for concrete to build all the new construction that's going on in Charlotte the last 15, 20 years or so. There's a lot of truck traffic, diesel vehicles, and that type of thing. The facility is engaged in blasting rock, et cetera. And all of these circumstances can impose a negative impact on the neighborhood, the dust, rocks, and so forth that gets consumed by the abutting neighborhoods. And as I mentioned, the I-77, most recently, the last few years, there had been construction to widen the I-77 for the toll road. Again, we have neighborhoods abutting both sides. The pictured neighborhood, Genesis Park, on the other right side, Oaklawn Park. And these communities were exposed to, again, equipment that was utilized to the diesel equipment that was utilized to construct the expansion of the toll, and also, again, a major source of pollution, the vehicles that traverse the highways. And again, there's no protection from these neighborhoods, no filtering or any type of way to reduce the pollution that they're exposed to. So a lot of these communities were exposed to that more so during the 2 to 3 years beside just the normal traffic flow. And the photo on the bottom side now shows somewhat kind of today. Again, they have grass and so forth now, but they constructed a sound barrier. Again, emissions and so forth, pollution is airborne, so they're still susceptible to these types of concerns. We also have other facilities within the community that we are concerned about. We have a lot of concentration of industrial facilities, some asphalt facilities, truck stops, some on Statesville Avenue, truck exchanges and so forth that contribute to our overabundance of pollution that our communities are exposed to and negatively impacting our health.
Understanding and addressing challenges through community monitoring. In 2017, working with Clean Air Carolina, a group of residents, particularly Ronald Ross, William Hughes, and Matt and myself, we began to have the monitors installed on our homes. As a result of having the monitors at my home, one morning, I woke up and there was the city of Charlotte had, they were resurfacing the pavement in front of my house. I noticed the change in the air quality immediately. It was really off the chart. So as a result of having those monitors, we were able to collect data that would shift the thinking around how we go about coming into neighborhoods and doing street repaving or whatever, resurfacing, and have the city to notify neighborhoods more instead of just coming in and polluting the air in that manner, because you had the pollution from the vehicles and also from the pavement, the resurfacing chemicals.
As a result of our citizen science, air monitoring and advocacy efforts, along with Mecklenburg County Air Quality Department, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency approved a regulated monitor, which measures 2.5 particulate matter, which is installed in the historic West End area. We had several meetings with Mecklenburg County Air Quality, Board of County Commissioners, and also the newly formed at the time Environmental Stewardship Committee to share our concerns and address some suggestions on how we can resolve our findings and again, improve the quality of life and quality of air that's being breathed in our community. So this monitor is installed at the Friendship Sportsplex behind the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. And again, just as a regulatory monitor, this monitor collects data which is used in regulators' decision-making. The data collected, again, is at the Friendship Park Monitoring Station, scientifically and legally defensible.
Advocacy steps included executive summaries highlighting the environmental injustice issues. We listed steps to create our historic West End Green District. This report was sent to city, county, and state elected officials. Presentations was made to Mecklenburg County, as Ron just indicated. Commission approved locating a federal EPA PM 2.5 monitor in the historic West End, this was installed February of 2020.
So the community advocacy vision for historic West End Green District. So we want to build upon our monitoring efforts. We want to expand it. And again, we'll put out a request. Hopefully we can get some of you that are on the line to participate as well. And we want to continue and increase our efforts for advocacy and do outreach within the community. Again, our main premise is we want to reduce the impacts of air pollution through the implementation of increased tree canopy and green infrastructure. Again, we want to do continued outreach and increase community understanding about poor air quality and health. And we want to continue efforts of engagement with the city, county, and other partners around these efforts. And we want to expand and lead and provide, make this a model for other communities that are impacted by air quality pollution, be it within Charlotte, other Charlotte communities, county, state, and so forth. The pictures depicted here are some of the projects that we've worked on. Again, we talked about the air quality monitor. The one photograph here with the young lady holding the baby is a monitor, a pillar. There are 4 pillars that are in existence on the Beatties Ford Road corridor that indicate historic West End. So we were looking at putting some green infrastructure on that to highlight the necessity of that, and also to provide insinuation as far as where green infrastructure can contribute to cleaning the air. And again, we've recently had a installation of a charging station at off of Beatties Ford Road at Washington Heights. And again, we want to continue advocacy efforts. Again, this is a presentation advocating as far as clean cars and so forth that we do continue.
One of our goals is to increase preserving and improving tree canopy and green infrastructure along the corridor and in sensitive areas, installing green walls, green roofs, and other green infrastructure, mitigate and reduce health and pollution impacts. Some of those projects, as Ron just mentioned, includes the Wells Fargo ATM Clean Air Garden, advocating for city designated conservation areas within our communities, advocating for a regular city schedule for tree maintenance and planting, tree adoption with Tree Charlotte, Mecklenburg County Partnership participatory budget that we just recently participated in, include installing solar trees, increased air monitoring, and the big belly trash cans. Charlotte 22 placemaking, what Ron just talked about, a historic West End green pillars.
And if I could just add about the Met County Participatory Budgeting Project, some of the other things too, again, with the big belly trash cans, those are something that, again, provide a mechanism for trash, and also would provide Wi-Fi access and that type of thing. Solar trees provide Wi-Fi access, plug in cell phones. Also, with the panels that are out, they can provide coverage in case of inclement weather, such as raining and so forth, and could provide a source of water as well. Again, these are projects that the District 2 recommended for this particular budget, and hopefully some of these will get approved and implemented. And
goal number 2, advocating for electric vehicle charging stations and more walking, biking, and clean transit throughout the historic West End, while also providing economic benefits and career opportunities for the community around EV expansion. one of the things that we worked with the residents with the Historic Western Green District, Clean Air Carolina NC, was, and Duke Energy UNC Charlotte, was the installation of the pole vault. And then we also installed purple air monitors in this vicinity at the Ritz at Washington Heights. The EV, the pole vault for the EV charging station is a huge, innovative approach that resulted in the mayor and the governor coming to visit this particular site. I must say they were very impressed, and I think as a result of his visit to this particular site, he did make some major adjustment to the budget around environmental injustices.
I also want to, again, as with this presentation, we want to increase education around air quality and how we can impact or increase our advocacy process and provide solutions to the problem that we're trying to address. Again, we're offering clean air advocacy training such as this, and we'll follow up with another series in regards to healthy air education. And we want to expand and involve residents, community of all ages, and again, continue corporate, city, county, and other organizational partnerships. And again, this is pictures depicting our outreach and sessions on education aspects that are very important.
Advocacy efforts moving forward. Engaging in recent funding opportunities from the Biden administration, the infrastructure bill, Justice 40, etc. Provide heat relief at the bus shelters within our communities, seeking affordable opportunities and incentives for residents to obtain electrical vehicles, as well as increasing bike lanes, walking paths, and other forms of clean transit, which emit no pollution.
Again, going forward, we want to get involved in negotiating something that's new to the area, North Carolina community benefits agreements with local polluting entities. And we would like to get them to provide tangible benefits to the community, such as jobs, daycare centers, scholarships, offering to invest in tree canopy and the like. We also plan on meaningfully involving local schools, colleges, and universities. And we want to pursue clean construction partnerships with developers and companies that are seeking to develop and expand their businesses in our neighborhoods, and also work hand in hand in replacing older equipment with, there's a program through Mecklenburg County Air Quality that Megan will probably mention that can assist them in getting, retiring their diesel equipment as well. So
thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the presentation and picked up some points, and we look forward to further engagement and getting everyone involved in providing cleaner air to our communities.
Again, I want to say thank you on behalf of the Historic Western Green District, Clean Air Carolina. Thank you all so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Thanks.
Thank you all for the presentation.
Don't leave us yet. We're
So
still
I'm
on.
still here with you. I'm not going.
Okay. You're welcome.
Before we get into the next presentation, I just wanted to open up to see if anyone had any questions for Ron and Maddie as it relates to the Historic Western Green District or any of the things that they covered.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. Hi, this is Michelle. I cannot see the video. I can hear, but I can't see.
Michelle, it looks like you're calling in by phone. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Miss Joseph. Joseph.
Okay. So we will send the recording via email after this session. So you will be able,
Great.
as long as with the slides, so you'll be able to walk through it and view the slides that we're showing.
Great.
Again, thank you so much for joining by phone.
It was a wonderful presentation. My question was, were there going to be any additional opportunities? You guys said, yes, we could be a part of it, but how could we get in at the bottom floor of advocacy of other things we might want to see implemented along with the ones that you guys suggested? Who do we talk to about that?
So go ahead, Daisha.
Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Okay. So through these sessions that we're having now, there'll be for you to contact us and
Okay.
again, let us know what your interests are and that type of thing as well. And we'll let you know about projects, and because we have some things coming up, and we definitely will need some volunteers and so forth to help out with the projects that you heard this morning as well. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we also
Okay, so then,
Good morning. This is Dr. Blanche Penn. I do have a quick question. Can you hear me?
yes, go ahead.
My question is, everybody talks about the transportation as far as biking and walking and things of that nature. That sounds good, but what about and bus and trains? Because I like the bus, I like the train. But as seniors, what are we doing for our seniors? And then, because I have 2 bikes at my house, and my grandkids don't even want to ride them. And so what are we doing for that age group? Or is that something that y'all will be talking about a little bit later? I don't know.
Dr. Penn, this is Maddie. I think that one of the things that we are doing with the city, not only with the electric buses that are coming out, which is cleaner energy, but looking at, providing to the city our suggestions and our thoughts on how we can do more with our senior citizens. Like you say, whether it's the strategic mobility plan that was recently adopted by the city, but making sure the seniors can have, the sidewalks. You got to have some safe sidewalks as well.
Yeah. So what I might add as well is that again, we're talking about senior citizens, so they may not be as mobile as people. I know we talk about walking and biking, but again, that's your question. Someone's ability to do that. So I think again, we'll have to work on some ideas, but my thoughts would be that again, it needs to be built around transportation where we can provide minivans or buses to facilitate where they need to go, or provide a resource, again, an electric vehicle that can be accessible to them for transportation needs that they may have to have. So to me, that's a way to tackle it if someone is doesn't have the capacity of actually physically walking and that type of thing. So
Yvette, did you have a question?
Not so much a question. I know both Miss Maddie and Ron work with Ron on the participatory budget project. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Worked with him on the participatory budget project, and I too am hoping that District 2, that those things that we put forward and voted on, like the environmental efforts that we put forth, are actually funded. Also, I work at Johnson C. Smith University, and we have a sustainability village. And as you know, Johnson C. Smith University sits in the very heart of Charlotte West End at Five Corners. there in District 2. And Dr. Mark Dugo and I have been reaching out to various communities. So we would love an opportunity to partner with each group that's represented here so that we can work on sustainability efforts like clean air. So I welcome the opportunity to reach out and figure out how we can contribute to this, because I really think it's important to involve every entity we can to support clean air and sustainability efforts.
Yvette, this is Maddie. Thank you so much for your feedback. I too, as you know, work at Johnson C. Smith University, and we have been working over 5 years with Dr. Otenenberger with the Clean Air NC, and we hosted several of our advocacy training and clean air seminars, workshops, along with Megan Green from the county. So we have been doing this work at Johnson C. Smith, and because Johnson C. Smith is that beacon of hope that we have throughout the community. So we must engage, as Ron stated earlier, in all aspects of engagement with our institutions and residents along the historic Western Corridor. So again, we look forward to working with you and with Dr. Dugo on future projects. Thank you.
Right, are there any more questions before we move on?
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm Carol Fuller. Maddie stated that when they do the pavement and all, they don't inform the neighborhoods. I wanted to know, if they do inform the neighborhood, how should we react to the information while they're paving? What should we tell our residents?
I think one of the things that we were advocating for, Carol, is to make sure neighborhoods are notified in advance about the paving and the resurfacing of our streets. And given the city, county, making sure we have the information of how to mitigate that pollution, meaning whether it's if they think that masks are appropriate, make sure the residents along those streets have that particular mask. Make sure they are notified about the whether your windows are open or how do you mitigate the impacts of the pollution. So okay. I think, but informing the residents, but just don't, as in my case, I just woke up that morning and heard all this here pollution stuff all over the place, and we didn't know anything that was going on. So I think that approach is changing, and they're doing more engagements and involvement from the residents.
Great. Thank you for that information.
Thank you.
All right. So we're gonna get into our next presentation here. So Ron and Maddie gave a great overview of citizen science air monitoring and how it has led to these many other efforts in advocating for clean air initiatives through the historic West End Green District. And so Miriam and I are going to get a little bit more into that and dive deeper into Clean Air Citizen Science Program, what that consists of, and then we'll be getting a little bit more into the Purple Air Monitor that Maddie, Ron, and some other historic West End residents have been using to track and identify air quality trends around them, as well as how to navigate through the air quality map associated with that monitor. And finally, we'll get into some data outcomes that have resulted in monitoring in the historic West End over the past few years and how to get involved. So just starting off, what citizen science is, as you can probably have gathered, it's a form of public participation in scientific research and monitoring activities that are designed to improve communities' understanding of the environment around them. This, of course, includes air quality monitoring. And this type of community-led research is important for many reasons. For starters, because air pollution is invisible, The benefits of taking action are not always immediately clear. We can't see it. So air quality monitoring allows us to visualize pollution through data collection. And we'll go a little bit more into this when we go to the purple air map. But then secondly, air quality monitoring and citizen science allows us to fill in data gaps when it comes to regulatory monitoring and disparities that may exist within our communities. So our partners with Mecklenburg Air Quality will get a little bit more into how air quality is managed and monitored at the regulatory level. But traditional government ran air quality monitoring. It relies on fixed monitoring stations across the state. I've actually included a picture of them here. And it measures a range of different pollutants. So in total, we have 49 regulatory monitoring sites, 5 of which are here in Mecklenburg County. And again, these measure a range of pollutants. However, North Carolina has 100 counties, and concentrations of pollution are likely to vary dramatically, even at the neighborhood level. So by monitoring around the areas we live, work, and play, communities can leverage the existing air quality monitoring expertise that government agencies already possess while filling in gaps with their own experiences, especially when it comes to exposure and health outcomes at the neighborhood level. Which brings me to my third point, which is monitoring can help us protect our health. So for those that have sensitivities like asthma, COPD, or other respiratory conditions, air pollution exposure can be really dangerous. So knowing your air quality immediately around you can help with the daily management of these conditions. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight data autonomy. So through having your own monitor, you get to be the author of data rather than the subject of data collection. And that's really important for communities. So as we go through this presentation, I just challenge you to think about, what questions you might have around environmental data and community monitoring, or around your environment that community monitoring can answer, and how can you take action. So what are we monitoring and measuring? As mentioned in the last presentation, very briefly, one of the primary pollutants of concern when it comes to impacts on our human health is fine particulate matter. So our monitoring efforts surround equipping communities with knowledge of local exposure of this pollutant. So particulate matter, it's a pollutant that's made up of actual particles, and it can be solid or liquid conglomerates of different chemicals. It's often referred to as a toxic cocktail, meaning that no particle is the same. It's just a mix of different pollutants. And when it comes to particulate matter, the size of the particulates is really important, and it determines the potential for how it gets into our bodies. So for example, particles that are larger than 10 microns in diameter, they're typically trapped in our nose and our throat, and they don't reach inside of our lungs because they're bigger in size. But particles that are 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller are small enough to be breathed into the deepest portions of our lungs and even bloodstream. So it's important to know the concentrations of PM around you and how it may be impacting your health. And we can understand this exposure a little bit more through the air quality index. So this is just a color-coded index that indicates how clean or polluted your air is based on air quality data, as well as steps people can take to reduce their exposure to pollution. So as the AQI, or air quality index, increases, larger and larger percentages of the population are expected to experience health effects. So just as an example, the EPA ranks air quality on a scale of 0 to 500. So anything from 0 to 50 is green, and that means it's good. Then as pollution rises, it goes from 51 to 100, which is moderate, and then 100 to 150, which is unhealthy for sensitive groups. Then it goes up to unhealthy, very unhealthy, and hazardous. And so as you can see on this graph too, the AQI has different meanings depending on which pollutant you measure. So for PM 2.5 specifically, the air quality index is often measured in micrograms per cubic meter. And then monitors then translate those concentrations into the EPA AQI index and gives a certain color. So this is just an an example taken from Air Now. Air Now is a great resource to look at air quality concentrations around you from the regulatory monitoring. So as you can see, this map is of North Carolina, and you see the yellow, which indicates moderate levels of air quality, and then it goes up to unhealthy at certain periods. And this is because this was on July 4th. So this is when fireworks were happening. As you can see, as they were going off across our state, levels of ozone and PM reached unhealthy levels as people were, going, celebrating and going off with their fireworks. So it just gives you a perspective of how when pollutants are in heavy concentrations, it shows up in these different colors. And the purple air map also does that, and we'll go over that a little bit. So clean air, again, we've been collaborating with local communities and schools across North Carolina to deploy sensors and understand, so communities can understand their exposure to particulate matter. So behind these monitoring efforts is a new generation of low-cost sensors that can provide immediate information to communities about their own air quality. We use two basic kinds of sensors. The first, we use it less frequently. It's more for our lending library. So we give it out to schools and just people that are interested in doing little projects. And that's the air beam. So that's that monitor up here, up top. And this is a mobile sensor. So you can take it with you as you walk around. These are useful to track where there may be local sources around you, or if you want to take a certain route and see if it has pollution hotspots. This is a good monitor to use. But the sensor that we primarily use is the purple air, and this is stationary and can be set up outdoors or indoors to collect data continuously at one place over time. This data is then publicly available to anyone via the purple air map, which we're going to visit real quick now. And also just a disclaimer, again, these are not regulatory monitors. These are just personal sensors that people can use. So this data is not used in a regulatory sense, just so we're aware of that. It's taking a little bit of time to load. But this is the purple air map. So I'm going to zoom in here on Charlotte. So this public map is actually a big reason why we find purple air so favorable. You don't need to have a monitor to explore and access this data. Once you obtain and register a sensor, it shows up on this map. So each circle is going to show where a sensor is located. And then the colors, they represent the concentrations of PM 2.5. So again, just getting back to the air quality index and what this means in this context, as these sensors are collecting and outputting data on pollution, it translates that reading into the EPA standards of acceptable levels of pollution through colors. So green is good, yellow is moderate, orange is unhealthy, and so on and so forth. So as you navigate through the map, you can begin to see the varying levels of pollution, even within the same areas. So this is actually my sensor here. As you can see, a sensor in the same neighborhood as me is reading a 38. Another one down the street is a 78. So it's varying, even within the, again, even within the same neighborhood. So once you click on a sensor, it'll show you the name of it. So this is Clean Air NC, meaning this is Clean Air's monitor, and it's located in the Elizabeth neighborhood. And then it'll give you an explanation of the air quality levels. So it's telling me air quality is acceptable. However, there's probably a risk for some people with 24 hours of exposure. So it'll just give you a little bit of background on that. And then you'll also see an option to see average increments of exposure by the minute. So you could do 10-minute averages, 30-minute averages, 1 hour, or 6-hour averages. You could even go up to a week. But if you wanted to do extensive analysis over a period of time, you can pull data from a monitor for as long as it's been in operation. Miriam is going to get a little bit into how we have pulled data from the historic West End monitors. And we'll be giving a resource packet too as well. And part of that will include how to download this data yourself if you're interested in doing some of the analysis that Miriam will be going through today. So I will.
Thank you, Deja. Good morning, everyone. My name is Miriam Magoob, and I have been working with Clean Air throughout this summer as an environmental justice associate. As Deja just mentioned, a lot of my work has been centered around downloading and interpreting data presented on Purple Air with monitors, not only within the historic West End, but within the surrounding regions. So the graph you see here, for the spring of 2022, measurements of daily averages of PM 2.5 exposure were collected within the historic West End. The graph highlights Washington Heights, which you see in pink, Oak Lawn Park, you see in yellow, North Hoskins in blue, and the Ritz Park presented in orange. Additionally, the graph provides the EPA AQI that Deja just covered. This is presented as a green dashed line indicating good air quality. Between April 17th to June 12th, Oak Lawn Park, North Hoskins, and the Ritz Park exceeded this threshold on numerous occasions, shedding light on trends of long-term exposure. Next slide, please. So as we discussed, Black and Brown communities are often more likely to be located in areas with higher levels of pollution. As a result, our team decided to conduct a comparative analysis to communities within Charlotte with different demographics, but similar sources of pollutants. The next slides will encompass similarities and differences between monitors located in Eastover in the South Charlotte region and the historic West End. The map on the left shows annual PM 2.5 averages from the EPA with higher polluting areas shaded in red in the South Charlotte region. As you can see, our monitor is located within the most polluted part of the region. That's an important fact to remember when we compare areas in Charlotte. Referencing the graph to the right, the collective air quality of South Charlotte, which is typically considered good, does not mirror what the Eastover neighborhood is experiencing. As a result, Eastover's poor air quality does not weigh significantly on the region collectively. This is another reason why the implementation of clustered monitoring is critical to act encompassing the full picture of a community's level impact. The next few slides will demonstrate trends in air pollution exposure within the historic West End compared to Eastover over the course of 3 years. Next slide, please. So the two graphs presented are PM 2.5 hourly averages from every day in the year of 2019. This means that the level of PM 2.5 at 12 a.m. is calculated by averaging the amount of PM 2.5 detected at 12 a.m. every single day for that given year. The graph presented on the right shows a comparison between Eastover and the historic West End monitors, which are Washington Heights, Oak Lawn Park, and Northwood Estates. It's evident that Eastover has the highest level of exposure to PM 2.5 within Oak Lawn Park, nearing the same level of exposure, then followed by Northwood Estates, and then Washington Heights with the lowest level of air pollution among the historic West End monitors. As previously mentioned, utilizing one air monitor within the region of Eastover cannot illustrate the full picture. The figure to the left demonstrates a comparison between average Mecklenburg County regulatory monitors, historic West End monitors, and Eastover. All three regions, mimic similar patterns showing elevated peaks between 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. For Mecklenburg County, only 2 monitors are taken into account, one in Garinger and the other in Raymount. Mecklenburg County demonstrates the lowest level of exposure, while Eastover has the highest level of exposure. Keep in mind, Eastover is 1 monitor, while the historic West End encompasses 3 monitors, presenting a more accurate depiction of the condition of the region overall. Next slide, please.
Before moving to the next slide too, I want to reiterate that the personal sensors that we give out, the Purple Air, only measure particulate matter, while the county's monitor measures a whole bunch more pollutants, and they also are federal monitors, so they're just collecting a lot more information, just to put that in.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Deja. So in 2020, similar patterns are depicted in relation to elevated levels of exposure to particulate matter at particular times of the day. So referencing the graph to the right, all regions demonstrate a reduction in exposure to PM 2.5. In contrast to 2019, exposure within Eastover has significantly reduced. In 2019, having higher levels of exposure in comparison to the historic West End, Eastover has been able to surpass the historic West End and significantly improve their air quality within the span of a year. Additionally, similar to 2019, Washington Heights continues to be the outlier, displaying lower levels of pollution amongst the historic West End monitors. Also taking into account the graph to the left, which shows similar trends, all air monitors have improved in relation to the year prior. However, the historic West End is not improving at the same rate as Eastover. Next slide, please. Referencing the graph to the right, in 2021, Eastover is performing better than all three regions within the historic West End, or in relation to the historic West End, I should say, decreasing to lower levels of exposure than the outlier, Washington Heights. And then as Eastover's air quality continues to improve into 2021, Oakland Park and Washington Heights have a slight increase in the concentration of PM 2.5 within the span of a year, while Northwood Estates slightly decreases. Similarly, the graph to the left demonstrates that the historic West End and Mecklenburg County, which entails the three air monitors from the year prior, which were Garinger, Friendship Park, and Raymount, have increased in levels of exposure to particulate matter, while Eastover continues to improve in air quality. Next slide. So between 2019 to 2021, it's critical to interpret and examine the data trends of these 3 years holistically. Eastover's air quality continues to improve at a drastic rate each year, while the historic West End slightly improves for 1 year and then reverts back to poor air quality the following year. For a location like Eastover, located in South Charlotte, to drastically improve their air quality in the span of 3 years, while the historic West End becomes more polluted, is a matter that should not be taken lightly. Potential factors to take into consideration for trends demonstrated between 2020 and 2021 are 2020 pandemic. Less people were traveling, could potentially be disproportionate access to working remotely during the pandemic. This could be a leading cause to limited exposure to vehicle toxic emissions amongst Eastover neighborhoods. The trends of this data highlighted the impact of environmental racism. The contrasting relationship between the results in Eastover and the historic West End highlight that it's easier for communities experiencing bad air quality in more wealthier areas to remedy and mitigate these factors than in historically marginalized communities. The historic West End is more than capable of demonstrating similar outcomes depicted within Eastover. It's just a matter of federal, state, county, and city officials, but most importantly, community members like yourself, to take a stance and advocate for the prioritization of environmental health amongst Black and Brown communities.
Deja, you're on mute.
You're muted, Deja.
Sorry. Okay, sorry, my bad. Thank you, Miriam, for that really good overview. Miriam has been working hard over these past few months, really going through all of these data and just trying to find trends of exposure in some of the monitors that we have. So as she highlighted, there's a lot that can come out of this data. We can really start to, again, track those trends in exposure, see how air quality has changed over time, and so much more. But what's missing, of course, is the community experience in this data piece. So monitoring data by itself only tells us what PM 2.5 concentrations are. It doesn't tell us what members of the community are experiencing on a regular basis. When we see spikes in PM 2.5, we can deduce those to maybe traffic, or in the case of the 4th of July fireworks, like I showed, or just different, even if someone is smoking right next to a monitor, that can cause spikes too. But many high PM 2.5 concentration events, we don't know exactly what's going on there. So it can be hard to connect this data to an actual source of pollution or an actual occurrence. So just as an example, if you remember, Maddie had stated that one day she noticed her monitor was spiking, and then when she investigated further, she found that there was street paving going on near her. So without her investigating that and noting that source of exposure based on her experience, we wouldn't have been able to make the connection between a spike in air pollution and what might have been causing it. So that's why we've created this new tool, which I just wanted to share with you all today, for emissions reporting. And it's a way to build public record of our experiences and what pollution is like near us. So whether you smell something foul, or you see a plume of smoke, or you see soot on your property, things of that nature, you can go on our website and report it. The county also has, from a more regulatory sense, in terms of sources from industrial sources, they also offer reporting. But this is just for public community experience. So we can start making more data connections to some of the stuff that our monitor hosts are seeing in their monitors, and actually come up with some solutions around that. So of course, this effort, combined with monitoring by our communities, can aid in a greater understanding of trends around air pollution exposure, improving models, and co-creating solutions. So that brings me to our closing. If you would like, we would really love you to join us in the Historic West End Air Keepers. You will need, for Purple Air, you do need reliable Wi-Fi, although there is a SD card option that can store data on the monitor until it's downloaded. Live readings won't show up on that map that I showed you, but we can still gather air quality data. So if internet access is an issue, we can get you an SD card one. You'll also need an outdoor power outlet that the monitor can actually connect to. And then of course, willingness to share air quality information with your community. So we are always accepting new monitor hosts. We would love to expand and understand more about pollution exposure in our community. So if you're interested in being an air keeper, let us know. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I've included the contact information for our citizen science manager, who actually runs the monitoring program, and also, of course, my information if you wanted to contact me about it as well. So I guess we will open it up for questions before we move on to our last presentation. If anyone has any questions?
Can you put the contact information back up there again? I wanted to take a picture of it because I actually do. I live like really close to the a facility that emits a lot of fumes, and I would love to be able to provide some data around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Contact me. I would love to get that set up for you. And these are the kinds of things that we're interested in monitoring, just understanding our exposure too. So that's awesome. So if there's no other questions, I will turn it over to Megan. Oh,
thank you, Deja. There you go, stop sharing your screen. Let me get this pulled up. So I understand that we're running a little bit behind, and so I want to make sure we have time for discussion. So I may go a little bit quicker than normal, but I think we are going to have time for Q&A and discussion at the end. So just a reminder, okay, there we go. I'm Megan Green from Mecklenburg County Air Quality. We're your local resource for improving air quality here within Mecklenburg County government. And our goal is really to make sure that we're meeting all the health-based air quality standards. And we actually have 3 program areas that help achieve this. We have our mobile sources program, which addresses kind of on-road and non-road sources of air pollution. Ron mentioned our grants to replace aging diesel engines effort. We also have a permitting and enforcement program, which you're going to hear me talk about in the next section. But today I'm really going to focus on our monitoring team and their work to measure how much air pollution is in the air. So we've talked a little bit already about personal air sensors, and I think Deja maybe mentioned, kind of tried to frame that these two things are a little bit different. So I just wanted to talk just briefly about some of the differences between the two. So on the left, we have our Friendship Park regulatory station. And on the right, we have a picture of a purple air sensor. You'll note just on seeing the two that the one on the left, the regulatory monitor, is kind of a larger footprint, fixed location. The purple air monitor is smaller, portable. Our monitors, as Deja mentioned, have to meet quality standards. The instrumentation itself has to be very high quality. It has to produce data that we are very certain that the data we're reporting matches what the concentrations that we're reading are. And I'll talk a little bit more about the kind of the quality controls that are in place to make sure that we have high certainty with that, the data that's produced from those monitoring stations. And it has to be high value, high quality data because it's being used to make both regulatory decisions and decisions about compliance with health-based standards. And so because of that, these stations are very costly both to install and operate. And so the sensors on the right can be much cheaper. They're much more accessible to a broader range of audiences than the regulatory stations, which are very costly both to install and operate. When we look at our monitoring network within Mecklenburg County, we have several different air quality monitors. I have shown them a couple examples here on the screen. We have the Friendship Park station here, which you've seen photos of and heard Ron and Maddie talk about earlier. This example here is our Remount Road air quality monitoring station that is adjacent to I-77. We are actually installing a second near road monitoring station just up here on I-85. And that is going to be coming in the next year. And then we have, as pictured here on the right, our Geringer monitoring station, which is one of our largest stations that monitors for many, many different air pollutants and is one of our largest stations within the county. But each of these stations, different air quality monitoring stations, they work as a network to basically provide representative data of how air quality is within the county. And so the goals are, again, to provide representative air pollution data to the general public in a timely manner. That data allows us to determine compliance with the health-based air quality standards. And the data we get from these monitoring stations also supports us as we develop strategies to improve air quality here locally. The two sites, for example, the Friendship Park site and the Geringer site that you see here are located in areas where they can determine both highest concentrations that we're expected to see in an area, but also representative of concentrations of air pollution in areas of high population density. And then the station on the left I mentioned is adjacent to I-77, and it's meant to characterize conditions in near road communities. This is, I think, the seventh highest trafficked roadway segment in the region. And the new air quality monitoring station that will be on I-85 is actually at the #1 highest roadway segment that has the most traffic within the region. So that will be an important addition to our network of air quality monitoring stations. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we site the air quality monitoring stations? The stations are cited based on criteria that's set by EPA. So you've got a couple different images here, but I'll just walk through from left to right. First, one of the factors that's considered is population density. So in other words, these monitors in our network are intended to monitor air pollution where people live. And so we try to orient monitors towards areas that have high population density so we can get, so we can understand air quality, the air quality where people are located, where people live. We also consider things like meteorological conditions. We see a wind rose here. Wind and wind direction can play a part in where you see high concentrations of air quality. Basically, from looking at this wind rose, we see that the wind in our region tends to go from southwest to northeast. And so you want to be sure that you capture information along that corridor of the wind and meteorological conditions, so you can make sure you have a full picture of air quality within a region. And then on the right, you can see that we also consider where sources of air pollution are as we cite our air quality monitors. This particular map shows sources of particulate matter, and the stars that you see on the map are our air pollution, our air quality monitoring stations for particulate matter. So those are just a few examples of the criteria. There's also criteria that Ron and Ms. Maddie may remember we went through when we were citing the actual station. So things like how far you are from a building or how far you are from a tree line. All of those things can, there are criteria related to all of those variables that are specific to individual locations for stations to make sure that we're getting air quality measurements that are representative and aren't influenced by like a building or a structure or a tree line, that sort of thing. Once we've actually got a station installed, we're required to operate our stations in compliance with quality standards. And so that includes things like making sure that we've calibrated our air quality monitoring equipment, making sure that they are, the flow rates, so the amount of air that's coming into the instruments is appropriate. We're reviewing data on a daily basis to make sure that there's not anomalies. We're looking for things like drift. So does our measurements skewing high or low over time, which could signal that there's an issue with the equipment. All of those things are things that we're considering as we have a team of actually 4 environmental specialists that are making sure that our monitoring stations are up and operational kind of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then all of this data, the reason we do all these quality controls on the data is because they are used to make regulatory decisions and to determine compliance with health-based air quality standards. So we've got, Deja mentioned the criteria air pollutants. Earlier in the presentation, we have a list of those here, and we have the compliance value and the air quality standard listed for each one of those common air pollutants. The thing I'll draw your attention to a few things on this table. We've got the different pollutants here on the left. We've got an averaging time. So different pollutants have a health-based standard based on different amounts of exposure. So an example, we've been talking about particulate matter. Particulate matter has 2 different health-based standards. The first is called a short-term exposure limit, and that's based on 24 hours or a full day of exposure. And then there's also an annual exposure limit, and that's based on averaging air pollution concentrations over a year. So more like long-term exposure. In both cases, the data that we're seeing from our network of monitors here within the county are below or better than the values that are set to be protective of public health. So for example, for the 24-hour or daily average, our monitors show a 19 micrograms per cubic meter compliance value, which is 46% below or better than the 35 micrograms per cubic meter health-based standard. For most of the pollutants, we are well below the standard. The one where we come the closest to the health-based standard right now is our ozone compliance value. And so when we see data like this, this gives us areas where we need to continue to improve air quality. And so again, this is an opportunity where I'll point you back to some of the efforts and that are already underway in the historic West End to try to improve air quality locally. And our team is ready to kind of support your community in trying to identify and implement those air pollution reduction strategies so that we can continue to see the kind of the percent below the health-based standard. We want to see that continue to improve. And do want to touch specifically on the Friendship Park monitoring station. We've got a few resources that are available to you. One is a sign. If you actually go out to Friendship Park, there's a sign out there that tells you a little bit about the different parts of the instrument out there. We also have a visitor's guide, which is going to come, I believe it'll be after this session. It'll come with your other resources, but it gives you some more information about the Friendship Park monitoring station and kind of if you want to go see it. And I hope you will take time to go visit the station. Helps you learn about the air quality data that's produced there, that sort of thing. And then the last thing I'll mention is that on September 10th, we are partnering with Friendship Missionary Baptist Church to actually have an open house, and the Historic West End leaders to have an open house at the Friendship Park monitoring station. So we'll have our monitoring staff out there along with our education and outreach staff. So you can learn about air pollution in general, but actually just kind of see the equipment, ask questions, talk with our monitoring staff about that instrument that's out there. And lastly, I do want to remind everyone, and I hope, Kelly, will you drop the links I know you can't click on the screen, but Kelly's going to drop links in the chat for how you can access the data from not just the Friendship Park monitoring station, but all the monitors in our network of stations. So we have information, real-time data that's available on our website. There's also an Air Now app. Deja did a great job of going into how the air quality index works, but there's all of the data is presented based on the air quality index. So basically it's the orange, red, and purple readings that signal when you should take action to reduce exposure to air pollution, which includes things like changing up the time of day when you're outdoors, reducing your total amount of time outdoors, or the intensity of your activity when you're outdoors. So with that, I will just leave you with a little bit of good news, which is that since 2016, since 2006, so over the last 15 years, the number of good air quality days we see in Mecklenburg County have doubled. And so what that means is that the air quality improvement strategies that are being implemented at the federal, state, and local level, including activities implemented by community groups like the Historic West End, are all working. They're improving local air quality by reducing air pollution from local sources. And so thanks to you all for being here today, and I look forward to working with you more in the future and talking with you again at the next session. So hopefully we have time for a few more questions. My contact information is here.
Thank you, Megan.
And I'm going to stop sharing so that we can actually see everyone in gallery view, but I'll put my contact information in the chat box so it's accessible.
Awesome. And Megan will be participating in the second session. Again, it'll be July 25th from 6 to 7:30. And she's going to go a little bit more into how the county actually regulates polluting industries and how permitting works within the county. So yeah, thank you, Megan, for providing that overview. Does anyone have any questions? I saw that someone asked about the gas leak in the city on Thursday and had mentioned how the odor was very strong and there are if there are air monitor stations in the city that help detect those types of incidences.
So the thing about air quality monitoring stations is that they're all designed for specific types of pollutants. And so since most of the air quality monitors in our network are not measuring for, in this case, it was mercaptan, which is a type of VOC, based on the initial look back, and it didn't have much time to look back, I don't know that we saw a big spike in the air pollution monitors, but of course our noses told us, so we didn't necessarily need the air quality monitoring stations to tell us that there was something going on because our noses detected the odor. But for example, the Friendship Park monitoring station, it would not have picked up that particular odor because it's designed to monitor for particle pollution. And in this case, the pollutant that was in the air was a VOC or a volatile organic compound.
Any other questions?
Megan, just a general question, throwing this out just in case someone was interested in it. Do the monitors, do they cover a specific geographic area that they're assigned to monitor?
They are. So they have different scales.
Mhm.
So the Friendship Park station is designed to be representative of what's called a neighborhood scale. We also, by contrast, the picture that was on the right-hand side of the screen when I showed the map with multiple monitors, the Garinger High School monitoring station is designed to be representative of kind of a larger metropolitan area. So it's part of what's called an in-core and national core monitoring network. It's one of only 2 monitoring stations like it in the entire state of North Carolina. And so it's designed and sited in a way that's representative of a much larger geographic area. So they vary.
Megan, I had a question. Just out of curiosity, how does Mecklenburg County standards, particularly the primary and secondary standards for PM 2.5, how does that differ from national standards, or are they the same?
Those are the same. And thank you for bringing that up, Deja, because that was in my notes to mention. So I showed the table and it had the compliance values with the health-based standards. The health-based standards are set by EPA. It's the same health-based standards across the entire country. They go back and review them regularly at a minimum every 5 years. And they're designed to be protective of public health. The 5-year review is designed to incorporate what we're learning about the impact of air pollution on human health. And so typically we see that as we learn more about the impact of air pollution on human health, standards become more stringent. And actually EPA is in the process of doing a review of the particulate matter standard right now. And some of the proposals would lower the health-based standard for particulate matter.
I see Miss Benita has a question.
Hi, I was just wondering if there are other counties across the state that are doing this type of work as well on a county level.
There are only 3 counties with local air quality programs. So the Winston-Salem or Forsyth County and the Asheville local program in Buncombe County. Elsewhere, other counties in the state have the state air quality agency that does both air monitoring and the industrial source permitting in those counties. So we are unique in that way that we're kind of local staff here locally. I would say kind of more boots on the ground, more of a personal understanding of the region, that sort of thing.
Does the state reporting focus more on industry? I'm just trying to figure out the type of data that's collected. Is it going to reflect the residents in the community and how the poor air quality will affect the people? Or is it just mainly for state regulatory levels to make sure that agencies are being compliant?
So the data that's collected by the ambient monitoring program typically has 3 several different goals, either to measure highest concentrations, both at community level or in some cases like neighborhood level, to measure background concentrations, or to characterize things like transport from different areas. That's the ambient program. There are monitoring requirements that extend specifically to permitted facilities that are enforced through the permitting and enforcement program. But the monitors that I was talking about today are typically trying to they are not typically what we call source-oriented monitoring. Source-oriented monitoring is usually part of a permitting or enforcement program.
Thank you. I was just trying to understand because I actually live in Durham County. And so I'm just trying to understand, I understand, I have a purple air monitor at my home. So I understand that part and particulate matter, but my community is surrounded by industrial. And so just kind of thinking, if my county does not do the type of monitoring that Mecklenburg County does, and they participate in basically a state level, what is the state level looking for? Are they really digging into the community level?
Right. We are what I'm calling ambient monitoring. every agency across the entire United States has to meet the same citing criteria. Like we're working with the same rule book, so to speak, or the same rules of the road, so to speak, when it comes to collecting and reporting that air pollution data. And so if you want more information specific to monitoring that's being done in Durham County, if you just type your contact information in the chat box, I can try to find a representative that manages the kind of the state program and operates monitors within Durham County to help give you more information about what you're seeing locally.
Dr. Ingram, did you have a question?
Yeah, just one quick question. So the last person that spoke in the question that she brought up a question in my head. It's like, so because it's only in 3 counties, is that because of a lack of knowledge? Is it because of lack of support, should we say, from bipartisan support in the North Carolina General Assembly? And do you have a champion in the North Carolina General Assembly that is kind of pushing for these type of programs and things of that nature? Does that make sense?
So I do want to clarify that there's an air quality agency that is doing similar permitting and monitoring work in all. There's an agency with authority in all counties. It just happens that our county government has the authority within Mecklenburg County and 3 other counties. So there is air quality work being done in other counties. It's just not being done by local government. It's being done by state government. That said, we like to think that there's a lot of benefits that come from having a local program. But I will toss the hot potato to June or some of the Clean Air Carolina staff, because maybe Andrew, to talk about who you see as allies or advocates in the General Assembly.
Oh, well, hey everyone, June Blotnick, Clean Air NC. I was just going online to get information for Bonita. So it looks like, and I put some links in there, Megan, you might want to look. I'm only seeing 1 monitor in Durham County. And there is one, it's a monitor that measures ozone, PM10, PM2.5, sulfur dioxide. So it's measuring different things, and it says it's at the near the Durham Armory. So I'm not sure where that is, but
that's in North Durham.
Okay. But like she said, the state is putting the monitors in as many counties as they can. We have 100 counties, so there are not monitors in every county. That was one of the reasons we wanted to get the purple airs out, to put them in areas where there is no counties, no monitors. I guess I wasn't sure of the last question. Was it you, Yvette, or
I was in the General Assembly.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, like, what support are you getting, and who can we, lobby in the General Assembly? We have lots of friends, and I want to always put it on the radar. And because this is an issue that affects African Americans more egregiously, I'm a member of the African American Caucus, so just something that we can support and champion and lobby for.
Yeah. Well, I think Mecklenburg has a pretty strong delegation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, DeAndrea Salvador, state senator, is on our board, and she's, strong commitment to environmental issues. Becky Carney is very interested. I mean, a lot of the Mecklenburg delegation we can count on for things that are air related. But in general, the General Assembly over the last 10 years hasn't been as, environmentally friendly. And so, we've seen things that we worked for rolled back. So I think you bring up a good point, and I think even in future advocacy training, that's a good topic for us to, who are legislators, what kind of committees there are that relate to air pollution and health, who's working on health equities, are there any doctors in the legislature? So we could do a whole hour on that kind of thing, and I think it would be a good idea.
Absolutely.
June, I'd just like to add, when I say to people, your vote, your voice matters. And we are looking at those particularly elected officials that are sensitive to those particular concerns that we are experiencing along the historic West End Green District and in other areas throughout the United States. So it's important that, like this week, we have early voting. It's important to know those council persons and, you know, that are friendly to our environmental needs and issues.
Mm-hmm.
And as I stated earlier, the Mecklenburg delegation, they were here when we were doing the EV pole vault, and it was a tremendous turnout from them.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, you know, even with the legislature, Benita, you're in Durham, there may be other people from other parts of the state, but that's where you can really come together and work. We've got to work, you know, with people in Durham and, you know, Sampson County and Robinson County and Greensboro on these issues. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to me because I've shared with Deja that in Durham, our environmental community, they mainly focus on water or land or trees. There was no one really talking about air quality and monitoring. And, you know, basically they're saying, oh, we'll just plant more trees, but you need to do more than just plant more trees.
Yeah, you need to, like you said, what are the sources in your community? You can actually, like, I think, Deja, you shared a slide on emissions. You can actually run reports on, that's all public record, those industries. And you can really look at what they're emitting. Do they have any violations, things like that.
And we'll go over that a lot more in the next session as well.
I know that we're past time, but we've got a couple more questions from Sharon Robinson in the chat. She asks, since the monitors are designed for specific particles, are those particles the ones that are common to industrial plans, et cetera? How do we determine which particles we want to monitor, or is it based on health-based standards?
So the number of monitors in an area are based on EPA guidelines. So you heard me mention that we were adding a new near road monitoring station. That's because we hit a population threshold. We exceeded, I think it's 2 million in the MSA, the metropolitan statistical area. So there are guidelines based on population and other factors that dictate how many air quality monitoring stations there are for each different type of air pollutant. And then, I'm sorry, let me go back. I answered the second part of the question first. Let me go to the question. Is the program? Okay. Andrew, will you help me? I have not answered that full question. Will you help me so I'm not scrolling through the chat?
It's
what was the other part of that question?
Up just a couple comments. Since the monitors are designed for specific particles, are those particles ones that are common to industrial plants?
So yes, there are nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides, particulate matter, and carbon monoxide are all categories of pollutants that come from industrial sources. And so, yes, there are monitors that are picking up the types of air pollution that are emitted, not just from industrial sources, but also from mobile sources, which is our largest source of air pollution in the county.
Yeah, it's really a tricky science to learn about particle pollution because there's diesel exhaust, right, from buses and trucks, and they have a specific type of air toxics in them compared to some other particle matter. So it's all we can do, like for instance, and I'm sorry to take so much time, but in Sampson County, we're going to be putting purple airs, but because they have the hog lagoons that put off ammonia, we also want to do different monitoring for that pollutant. So, but PM 2.5 in itself, whatever is in it, is not good for our health because the particles are so fine, they get into our body and can really cause havoc.
And I wanted to quickly touch upon Sala's question, which are what are your promotional plans in getting the word out about air quality and how residents can get involved? of course, the Historic West End Green District on the community level is a great way to start. As we mentioned, we have multiple projects and initiatives going on. In terms of green infrastructure, we're working with Tree Charlotte and the city to implement strategic tree planting, but we're also implementing a clean air garden and the pillars. And so that's we have a green team that we're going to start to help manage some of those sites and just ensure that we're installing measures to mitigate air pollution. So trees help to filter it out. And then of course we have monitoring and many of the other things associated with that project. But from the county perspective, as Megan mentioned, the Friendship Air Monitor, there will be an event there. I think that's probably one of the more recent promotional marketing just events that's happening around air quality with that. But I'll let Megan chime in if there's anything else going on.
No, I think what we hope to do is support kind of as the community identifies priorities that you want to pursue to improve air quality locally, try to connect you with resources and support your efforts kind of as you all define what it is that you want to do within your community. I think the only other thing I'll mention is that there has been a backyard burning educational campaign that was created. Ron Ross has door hangers that can be placed on if you have neighbors that are burning. So burning trash is illegal, but we heard in the first kind of set of clean air advocacy trainings that we did in the Historic West End that people didn't want to take didn't want to have a regulatory response to that. So they didn't want to call and have their neighbors fined or cited for doing this kind of activity. And so we developed a whole educational resource specifically about backyard burning that talks about calling 311 to dispose of bulky trash. Like, here's how you find out where your local shredding event is so that you're not burning confidential papers. But that's just another example of where we try to work together to meet the needs of the community, but maybe not do it through, even though it is illegal to burn trash, like knowing that the community didn't want to take a kind of a more of a regulatory approach to addressing the problem, we were able to adapt and create a community-based marketing campaign to address the concerns.
Absolutely. And that door hanger will actually be going out in the resource packet that I'll be sending out after the second session along with stipends. Last question we had, or not the last question, if anyone else has questions, I'm willing to stay on for however long, but what is a clean air garden? So that's one of the projects we've been working on. We received funding from Wells Fargo to install a garden at their property. And so it's going to be an educational garden. We're going to have signage there to indicate, what we're doing within the Historic West End Green District, but also to educate as people, utilize the ATM or passing this garden of why green infrastructure is important and just projects around expanding gardens and greenery around communities and how just bringing attention to how that can mitigate air pollution. So that's a project that we have going on, but it's at an ATM site, so there's not regular watering. So again, we'll be looking for volunteers from the community and within the Historic West End Green District to help maintain some of these green projects that we have going on. And that'll be installed in the fall. Ron, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I just wanted to add that it is located at the ATM machine. So again, it's not the ideal situation because you have people that utilize that facility and the vehicle's idling. So you're sitting, and that's not what we're trying to, we're not trying to promote car idling, but at least through that means it's an opportunity for us to highlight the importance of, an awareness of air quality that we need to be aware of. And just another point, when Megan mentioned about the trash burning process, again, just that we are aware, and hopefully through this presentation, you become aware of certain things. Again, what happens outside, again, can dictate what you do that day. Do you want to go jogging because the air, you get your air quality index reading and it's bad, it's red. Don't go jogging then. If somebody's coming by paving, don't go outside or go somewhere else, go shopping or something else, so you're not around the pollution that's being emitted. So again, we're trying to create awareness and again improve our quality of life in our communities. And again, we're adversely exposed to pollution, and we need to start adhering and trying to reduce those exposures.
And just adding just a bit to the garden for a second, the Wells Fargo money that came from obviously Wells Fargo to fund that garden, some of that money also came to host this series. So yeah, that's a part of that project as well. We had submitted a request for that funding for a garden and for for a cleaner advocacy training. So that's in part of what has come out of that project as well. Sharon?
Sure. What is the role of the advocate for the Clean Air program? Are we expected to educate our community members and help them modify their behaviors to decrease their impact on the environment and to increase and decrease the likelihood of negative impact from environmental issues that are going on? Or will some of this data that's being collected actually be used to take back to these industries to help them modify their environmental impact or footprint that they're having? So could you clarify on the role and the purpose for collecting data and how that data is being used? Is it being used to actually improve the communities?
So I'll speak a little to the data piece, and I'll let Ron and Maddie speak to the community piece. So again, the data that we collect from Purple Air Monitors, they're not used in a regulatory sense, meaning that Mecklenburg County Air Quality, they technically don't have to do anything with this data. Originally, like I said, it started as a form of just understanding levels of exposure at the individual level, at the neighborhood level. And then we were able to use the data that we collected over a year to create this report that Maddie and Ron talked about. So that report contained data that we had collected, and we used it to advocate for federal air monitors. So just putting that in perspective, I guess, is that data propelled efforts at the regulatory level, which was a regulatory monitor, which is used in regulatory decisions. And so that is, I guess, just a specific example of how we use the data, but it's also for you, again, to understand what exposure is like to particulates around you. Also, so we can identify more trends of what's happening in Black and Brown communities. We know that this is happening, but often we don't have a lot of data around it. So it helps to, create that case and helps to build up, just data around that. So I'll let Ron and Maddie speak from the community side of things.
I'd just like to say that the process we went through to get where we are today consisted of education, learning more about air pollution. And as a result of that, we were able to begin our advocacy training to advocate for the things that we want to see. We that live in our communities 24/7, we know what those needs are. We see the people that are sick around us and so forth. So education, and I always end up saying, information is power, knowledge is power. So we went about the route of education to be more knowledgeable about this.
Yeah, just real quickly, Sharon, I think everything you said is really what we're wanting to accomplish. But again, everyone has to be met, wherever you are, and address those concerns. So again, some people aren't aware of the problem. So again, they become aware of it. So and they're interested in, well, what can I do to make a difference? What can I do to make a change? And again, we want to address concerns with the industries that are contributing to the negative impact of their business within our community. We want them to provide benefit to our community where they're doing business. They're in our community generating millions and millions of dollars. So why is it just going outside of our community? Why cannot that not be spent within our community to make our community better and just a benefit to that business and having their bottom line look good? But I think all the items that you mentioned, again, I think every one of them is right on with what we're trying to accomplish and want to accomplish.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, for instance, the quarry, you know, like Ron said, we're trying to get more monitors around the quarry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mecklenburg County already monitors the quarry, but their monitors aren't right near there. So we're trying to just get a hyper-local picture of what residents might be being exposed to so that we can talk to the quarry and work out a community benefits agreement, right?
Yeah.
What can you do about the trucks coming through? What can you do? Do you have plans to expand? What is the buffer that is between you and the neighborhood, you know? So that's a big goal. And so, yeah, it's all part of using the data to take to businesses and government to see some changes.
Again, just as a plug, we're going to have a lawyer from Queen City Law Firm to go a little bit more into community benefits agreements and exploring that option with Martin Marietta and how that can be, how we could undergo that process.